This is Maureen Kafkas, the Brain BS coach, here to tell you about the episode today. In this episode, I speak with filmmaker and author Claudia Chotzen about her memoir, The Darkroom, A Story of Triumph, that she recently published. She shares her story of the abuse she endured at the hands of her parents, why she stayed quiet for so long, and how she was finally able to find her voice and claim personal empowerment for the very first time in her life recently. So sit back and settle in. Episode 142 of the Brain BS podcast, Personal Empowerment with Claudia Chotzen. Do you want more out of your life but not exactly sure what that might be? Are you longing for something but can't quite put your finger on what it is? That is the universe speaking to you, and it is time to listen up. I'm your host, Maureen Kafkas, the Brain BS coach. I created the Brain BS podcast to help people define what success means to them and show them how to get it. I help you to let go of fear and doubt and prepare your nervous system for success. I show you how to understand your own energy and to trust yourself to make all the decisions. If you are ready to go inward and stop looking outside yourself for all the answers, this is the podcast for you. Now let's get started. Hello and welcome back to the Brain BS podcast. I have my third person in the podcast that I'm interviewing in my Women Who Inspire Me series. And once you hear what we talk about today and you learn about her, you're going to totally understand why she's on the podcast. Her name's Claudia Chotzen, and I'm going to let her introduce herself in a moment. But first, I'm going to let you know how I heard about her. So I was playing pickleball with my friends Mark and Vicky in Montecito. And if you recall and you listen to all the episodes, I actually have an episode about how I became friends with those two. And it was really random and weird. I just walked up to their door one day and totally ended up hitting it off with them. And then one day at pickleball, they mentioned Claudia. And I was like, oh, tell me about Claudia. And then they were telling me that she has this book and they were telling me things about her. And I was like, wow, she sounds really interesting. And I was like, immediately wanted to know more about her. Well, then I met her and then I heard about her book. And I'm not going to say anything else right now, but she's amazing. And I'm going to let her introduce herself to you and let you know what she wants you to know about her.
Thank you, Maureen. It's very nice to be here with you. And yes, I'm Claudia, and I am 70 years old. I just turned 70 a few months ago. And I was an attorney, and then I was a filmmaker, a documentary filmmaker living in Hawaii. My husband, Hap, and I are about to celebrate our 44th wedding anniversary in like next week on the solstice. And we live here in Santa Barbara. And I had this book that I was needing to write for years and years and years, a story that I needed to tell, and my story. And so it took me about 20 years to be able to actually get ready to publish it. I wrote it quickly and pretty much all at once, but I couldn't publish it because I have 7 brothers and sisters who I'm very close to, and I wanted to protect them. And at that point, my parents were still living, and I wanted to protect them. I don't know why I wanted to protect them, but I felt like I needed to. So finally, the story was born, and it's called The Darkroom, a Memoir of Triumph. And it's out now, and I'll give it back to you, Maureen.
Okay, well, it's an amazing book. It's so beautifully written. It's real. Did I not tell you like right away that this feels like a bestseller type book?
You
Like
did.
it's really, and it's no wonder because of everything that you went through and all the different elements from both like emotional, mental, um, perspectives that it's just, it's a love letter really to your siblings, to yourself, and even to your parents, as odd as that might seem when we start talking about what your life story has been about. Your ability to not see everything in an all or nothing sort of way is really exceptional.
I really love hearing you call it a love letter. That actually made me tear up a little bit, because I think you're exactly right on with that. I am so grateful to all the people in my life, the people that helped me birth the book, my husband, our 2 incredible sons and their partners, and friends and therapists who I worked with for years. And it took a long time to know that it was really okay for me to tell this story and have my voice. But ultimately, I wanted it to be about love and about forgiveness. And what it's most been about is freedom. I mean, I have not felt this kind of freedom in my life. And here I, as I said, I'm 70 now. It took this long
Oh,
to finally feel like this weight has been lifted, and like it's all about, almost every day I just say, what can love do through me today? And ask
yeah.
that question. And I hope that this book is that same kind of service to other people and a message of love. So I love that you called it a love letter.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
love it too. And I love the title that it's a triumph because it really is a triumph with the way that you've dealt with all of it. And but like we're probably the audience is probably like, what happened? Like, what's the book about? So why don't you just give us a little story of what the book is about, and then we'll go into some. Claudia and I were talking before we came on here. There's so many things that we could discuss, and we only have like one episode here. And I definitely think she's going to be coming back to talk more about other things. But we're going to kind of talk about some concepts as we go to give us a little anchor. But first, I just want you to hear some background, and Claudia, just go ahead and tell them about
Sure,
what.
sure. Okay, so I am one of 8 children. My parents, both of them, were refugees from Nazi Germany. They're both Jewish. They both grew up separately in different. My mother was in a big city in Germany. My father was in a small town. Both of their families were very prominent, very established. And my father, in fact, his family had lived in this small town in Germany for over 100 years. His father was on the city council. They were very esteemed. I think they were one of the very few Jewish families in this town in Germany. And then when my mother was from a big city, her father had a woolen mill that made coats and wool things, and had been there for, well, they had over 1,000 employees at this woolen mill. And then, of course, their lives just changed overnight. My parents are 13 years apart, so my mom was a young girl. My father was in his 20s, and Hitler came to power. And they both have these stories of how their families were able to escape. However, many, many, many of their cousins and aunts and uncles were murdered in the concentration camp. So it was a miracle that they got to America and were alive. Both of their parents got out. So that very small group, and they met in New York. And then they moved. They were married within 3 months. They fell in love within 3 months. Were married. They moved to Seattle, Washington, and that's where they started a family. And they had 8 kids because my mother wanted to repopulate the earth from all the people who had died in the Holocaust, and she wanted 12 kids. And my father wanted 4 kids, so they compromised at 8 kids. And I am the 4th in that line of children. And then they were very well known in the Seattle community. My mother was a very independent woman in the years way before women had their own careers and raised their children. She was a professional photographer, a portrait photographer. My father started his own business with nothing. They had nothing left when they arrived, no money, no nothing, and he started a business. And then they raised us, and they raised us in the all Black neighborhood of Seattle, because they wanted us to not know prejudice like they had experienced in Germany, where people turned against them because they were Jewish. They wanted us to know that no matter who people are, what they believe in, what they are, that we all are, the same human beings, and to love each other. So we were one of the only white families growing up in the Black area of Seattle. So part of my book is all about the growing up white in a Black community and the civil rights movement. My mother was a leader in the civil rights movement in the 1950s and 60s. She was an icon. She was a hero to people in the community. And that's what we knew was how public a family we were. We all had to excel in, one sister was a musician. I was a dancer. We had to be shining examples of people out in the world. And the dark secret, which is why the book is called The Darkroom, was that my mother was molesting me. in our home from the time I was a very young child. In fact, they built a bedroom out of a closet right next to my parents' bedroom so that she could access me almost every night. And so she came out of the Holocaust situation, my father did, with lots of wounds that, very understandable. They didn't have a way to heal. They were very, very tortured people, but on the outside, we were this shining example of a family wherever we went. We were, this family that everybody admired and loved. And of course, nobody knew what was happening in the dark of the night in our home and in my bedroom. And so that is the story of living with that. And then I would say this will lead into something that you and I talked about a lot, Maureen, was I didn't tell. And I never told because there was such a code in our family. And my mother talked about it every day, which is your family, our family is the most important thing we have. Because we escaped the Holocaust, because we have our lives, we have to be loyal to each other. And our only purpose is to stay loyal to family. And your only purpose as children is to make up for the lives that were lost in the Holocaust.
Okay,
Which
wait,
is,
I'm
yeah,
gonna stop you
yeah.
there because you
Okay.
just told us a lot.
Okay.
And
Okay.
even though I knew this story, just hearing you talk about what pillars they are in the community and then what was going on at home, my eyes teared up because, like, listening to this, how could you speak up? I mean, you're in this situation where you're living a lie and it's not your lie, it's been imposed on you by your parents. And I just want to add, we haven't gotten to this part yet, but her mom wasn't just molesting her, they were abusive in a lot of different ways. It wasn't as if that wasn't bad enough, but this like was neglect. It was the whole, just the whole way they approached parenting was a huge lie. And for you to have to live that lie, and really you had to kind of partake in it until you
Yes,
actually got your book out, right?
absolutely. The whole way, my whole life. Yes. Partake in it, and the love was real. I mean, there really was real love. There were wonderful, wonderful memories, and they raised us with wonderful values about fighting for justice for everybody in the world. They imparted wonderful things to us. But yes, there was a lie underneath it that was going on that had never come out until I finally published this book.
Wow. So we had talked about this before. There's this one part of the book stands out to me probably more than any other part of the book because you start the book in the same way that you started this conversation about all the amazing things about them and how they instilled all these values in you. And then all of a sudden there's just this one paragraph in a chapter of how she comes into your room and molests you in the middle of the night. And it's so understated and in this little paragraph as if it's inconsequential, and everything that they did and portrayed themselves to be in the community was so much more important. But that had to have been the way that you kind of compartmentalized it in your mind when you were little.
Exactly the way I carpet. It had to be for me. This is just another thing that is happening. And I definitely, dissociated, left my body, learned to do that very well so that I would just lie there and take what she did to me. But it became such a routine part of my existence. And I had no one to tell. And, and that code was, we don't talk about this in the family. In fact, my father is a key player, as you know from the book. He was so in love with my mom and so grateful to her for loving him that I used to wake up in the morning, and usually probably once a week, he would say, "You have the most wonderful mommy in the world. You are the luckiest girl in the world. You have the most wonderful mommy." I know now he could not have not known what was happening and what she was doing, because it was in the bedroom right next to theirs. And she made loud noises when she had her orgasms on top of me. And, she left his bed every night. So there's no way he couldn't have known. but he was so bought into his fear of losing her that he would say things like that all the time to all of us, to all of us kids. You have the best mommy in the world. So how
Yeah.
does a
Oh my
child?
God. That's just like hard to even hear, you know,
Yeah,
that he said that. And also, you know what else I'm noticing when you say that I'm having a visceral reaction to is that he was in love with your mom. Because it doesn't feel like love reading the book. It feels like an obsession or a need for her to complete himself, as if he didn't know who he was if she wasn't there with him.
I think you're right on that, right spot on. It was like an obsession. And so there she was in the community. She was a hero. In our house, she was bigger than life. She was also very beautiful, very charismatic. She sort of spun a spell around everybody. And all the way, I think, throughout her life. One of my girlfriends used to say, your mom was like a goddess. She would sweep into the room, and everybody would just sort of, move to be around her. And so that was
So how was that for you? Like as you started to get older, because you have this devotion to them, which is like comes from a divine realm, if you ask me. It really does. But you have like this love and devotion for them. But there has to be, which I'm sure, because we kind of alluded to this, I'm sure you went through quite a process to get to this point where you're at now.
Oh, such a process. And for Maureen, for most of my childhood, I thought that I was crazy because, the outside world is saying you have the best, your father's saying it, everyone around you saying your mother's incredible, your mother's incredible. Even when I wrote the book, and a relative who I haven't met in England read the book, he wrote right back and said, this is impossible. This didn't happen. I've met your mother. I've met your father. I've met your family. They're incredible people. This never happened. Therapists planted this inside of you. And, and
Oh
it was
my God.
like being
That's
kicked in the stomach to hear that, and I had to stand up and say, no, finally, nobody gets to tell me what the reality is. But because that's how many years I spent thinking it must be my fault. And I think this is what a lot of abuse, victims go through, is that it must be my fault. I must somehow be doing something to bring her to me, to cause this, because the world is telling me that she's so great. And it's that growing and all through those years of working on this, finding out that there's two sides to every story. There's, there's many sides, multiple sides, and that there's no such thing as just, some of our most, admired people in the world have done some of the worst things. And
Yeah.
so
And it's when you're getting that mixed message as a kid, it's hard to figure out, like you can't trust yourself. So you learn early on not to trust yourself, and then you go with that as you get older until other things start to happen in life that sort of make you realize, like it's like all these different things happening for you to help you become more aware, that feel bad in the moment when they're happening. But that's like sort of, so let's go to boundaries, because when I read that book, I was like, wow, there are no boundaries with your parents, especially your mother. It was
right.
crazy. She just did whatever she wanted, whenever she wanted. And it made me think of when you actually did set boundaries with her, you not only had to set energetic and emotional boundaries with her, you literally physically had to set boundaries with her, because she would have just kept trying to molest you no matter how old you got.
That's exactly right. And a few, when I was writing the book and sharing it with a few friends, they would put, on the side of the page, but why didn't you speak up? Didn't you tell her to stop? And why did it take so long? It feels like it took a long time. I mean, it's taken me a long time, to share it. It took me till I was 16 years old to finally say, get off of me. And you're absolutely right. If I had not been able to do that, she would still be doing that. And when I did that, she acted all hurt. How can you hurt me this way? I'm just trying to love you. I mean, it was a brainwashing. We were in our own private cult. in this family.
Oh, for sure. There's no
Yeah,
doubt about it. So when
yeah,
people are questioning, like, I think this is important for the audience to know that we don't know what it's like to be in your family in that situation, or for that matter, for anybody who's going through anything similar. And to think that it's just that easy to start speaking up when you don't trust yourself, when you've been taught really not to interact with one another, but
right.
make your parents the focus of the family and loyalty to them, because you weren't really even talking to your brothers and sisters about this, right?
Absolutely not. On the other extreme of not talking to them about this, we were competing. They had set us up in a sense of a competition to please them. So because there were so many of us, we were sort of always competing for these scraps of attention or acknowledgement from them. And I felt it as we grew up, as everybody competing to get that acknowledgement from them. And so we were, even though I feel like I survived because of them, because we lived that reality together all through it. And we have the loyalty that I am grateful for the part of it that gave me these brothers and sisters. I also felt like, no, it was all about how can I get a little bit of attention from mom and dad, which was rare.
Wow. Yeah, that's so the whole tribe mentality, because we've talked a lot about this together before we came on here. The tribe mentality, like, all started back in the cave days for your survival. Like, you needed to know what everyone was doing, and everyone needed to be on the same page to, go hunt and gather and do all the things. But now, in this day and age, it's different. It's evolved. But now we have to do it like from an emotional and mental perspective. We think that we have to be like the other people in our family. And until one person breaks that bond and speaks up, it really just continues to perpetuate itself. It's somebody has to speak up, and you were the person in your family.
Yes, yes, that's very right. And it was, I thought that, I thought I would die doing this, in the sense when I call it die, I thought that, um, I would be excommunicated from the family. And they were all that I had. In terms of, I came to believe that as my mother, brainwashed us with, that all you have is your family. And so I was so concerned that I would be cast out. And there were, times along the way where I did stand up for things that were really, really tricky. Like, when my mother ended up having Alzheimer's late in her life, some of my siblings wanted her to come and live in my community in Santa Barbara so that I could take care of her. And doesn't that just give you the
Oh
creeps?
my God, my mouth's hanging open.
Yeah,
Like, dear
it was,
God, that's what she's responding to.
oh my God, it was so awful and so creepy. And I was trying to speak up to my brothers and sisters and say, no, 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 this won't work. And at that point I had talked, I hadn't published a book, but I had talked to all of them privately. They all knew one-to-one because I had interviewed each of them for hours at a time, and transcribed the interviews and given them back to them. And we had been there. But that was an example where, and I was fully an adult. Our youngest son had just left to go start college, and they wanted her to move here. And even one of my sisters said that, told the head of the agency where they wanted to put her that I would come and pick her up once a week and take her and bring her home and give her baths because she liked water so much. And it was at the point when I had to either say, I can't do this, and knowing that I might lose everyone in the family, including my husband was worried about that. He said, you're going to jeopardize your relationship with all your brothers and sisters because they were so determined that what this one sibling wanted, we were going to do, which was bring her to town in Santa Barbara. I would bring her extra food from Whole Foods that she liked. I would take her for a bath once a week.
Oh my God.
Can you believe it? I mean, these are the kinds of, so at that point I thought I might lose every one of them. And
Well, okay, so I'm going to stop
yeah,
you there.
yes,
The tribe mentality is a real thing, and it was embedded in your family. And
yes,
and when other people aren't speaking up yet because they're not comfortable and they haven't really come to terms with this, there's probably a great amount of denial going on about what really happened,
yes,
right?
very,
Like,
yes,
like they can know about it in an intellectual level, but that doesn't mean that they understand it at a core human level, what you went through. And because you didn't speak up for so long, they just were, it was just like old pattern, like it's like an old family pattern that, again, so what happens when you go to set boundaries, and this was a solid boundary that you created, you have to get to a point, and I did this recently, and it wasn't anything remotely like what you've gone through, but for myself, to take care of myself, I was willing to risk all my relationships with my whole family. I was no longer going to negotiate not having my own back and taking care of myself. And if that meant that I was going to lose somebody, then so be it. And I think that is sort of a universal thing with boundaries. We have to be pushed to a point where sometimes we just have to be willing to risk all of it to take care of ourselves.
You're exactly right. And I think you're exactly right about the fact that they might have known things intellectually, but there's a tribal mentality and almost like I don't, a dream, that we're all in, that we're still in that old world that we grew up in. And I even felt I was risking my own husband, who was saying, don't do this, because he was so terrified that I would lose my brothers and sisters, who he loves dearly too, and knows how much they mean to me. But there were three people in my life at that time. I think everything for them, who were saying, no, this is your no, you can do this, even if it means that you have to risk all of your family, your brothers and sisters, that you can't do this. And so, and then lo and behold, the whole process happened and happened. One brother, I remember him on the phone. We were having an entire family phone call when we were at the college where we were dropping our son. And during the night of his orientation at the new college, one brother was saying, if Claudia and Hap don't want her in their town, then why aren't we listening to them? Why can't we make it the next town, Ventura or whatever? Then, whatever. Why, if and this one brother, my baby brother, spoke up. And I mean, to this day, it still, makes me cry that he finally spoke up and said, why are we insisting on this? Somebody woke up and stood by me in the family, because I was ready to completely risk losing
That's
them.
exactly why somebody spoke up. But it wasn't until you got to that energy of this is a done deal, I'm not doing it, it's not negotiable, and I'm willing to risk everything. People respond to that. They accept it when we do that. It's when we're conflicted inside and we feel guilty and full of fear and doubt that we're doing something wrong and we're not truly believing in ourselves. I mean, you are made in the same image as everybody else. You are just as important. Your needs are just as important, but you were taught at a very early age that they weren't. And you also put you in the role of protector of everybody
Yes. Yeah,
in
very
the
much.
family, right?
Yeah,
So,
very much. The very hardest part for me of leaving, when I turned 18, and instead of going to college, I joined a dance company in Greece. So I went off. But I struggled so hard, Maureen, with leaving as the younger four brothers and sisters, because from the day they were born, what I wanted to do was protect them. And I would say one of the themes of the story that was the hardest for me, is that I couldn't protect them. I couldn't save them from what happened with my parents. They all had a different life than the older ones of us had. I think in large part because we did try to protect them, but I couldn't save them. And that was one of the hardest, parts for me of, I think I worked harder on what happened to brothers and sisters in my therapy than on what happened to me. That there's been studies that sometimes people, what they witness to people they love is a worse pain than what happens to themselves. And that's, for me, the fact that I couldn't keep my mother from hurting them, my father from hurting them, was a more painful grief for me. And
and the
yet,
fact that you thought it was your responsibility is where
yes,
it's kind of like, it wasn't,
right.
but it
That's,
felt like that, right?
yes,
But
yes,
because it's something in the way that you were raised, you felt this need. So it's really interesting because you were the one protecting them, right? You really were the leader of the family. and you've been a role model for all of them of how to speak your truth in a really like intentional way. It took you a really long time to publish the book because you love your siblings so much and you care so much, but you also got to a point where you care more about what you think about yourself than anybody
Exactly
else,
right.
and that's where we need to get in life, right?
That's exactly right. That was the point. All those years of it, being stuck in me and wanting to have my voice, wanting to speak it, wanting to tell the truth. And then every time I would write some more of it, I would, be ready to do it. And then it would be that other warring, like a war inside of me, of this other force of, I don't want to hurt them. I don't want to intrude in their lives. They all have their own adult lives. They have their children. I don't want to re-traumatize them. And it finally got to the point where, what am I going to do? I mean, it had to get, I'm turning 70 years old. I'm at the end of my 60s. Am I going to forever hold back and not speak out and not tell my story to protect these other people who are launched in their lives and having wonderful lives? They've all found love and wonderful families and wonderful creative lives. And I'm holding back quietly here about them. And they're not even asking me anymore to do that.
Yeah, so let's talk about that for a minute because
Okay.
that sounded so noble and so good, right? What you were doing, but it was total brain BS and it was coming from your ego because your ego wants to keep everything the same. We stay small, we stay in the cave, we don't rock the boat, we just keep everything exactly as it is, and but sometimes our brain BS can sound like it's working in our favor. So it can be kind of sneaky because you're like, well, and I'm not negating that you love your brothers and sisters and weren't thinking about them, but there is also an element of being able to keep yourself small and safe and not be the one to speak up and rock the boat. So we had to be on to ourselves. And when you were
Yes.
writing the book, you had like, and this happens with everything. It could even happen when you make plans to go have coffee with somebody in the moment because you really connect, and then when the time comes you just don't feel like going, right? So that's brain BS.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
it's like your higher self has you do something, you're committed to it, you're all in without a doubt, and no matter how evolved you get and no matter how much you work on spirituality, your brain's going to offer you all the reasons why you should not be doing whatever
Yes.
it is you're doing that's different, that's going to
Right.
evolve you to the next level because it's going to try to keep you the same.
That's exactly right. And I felt it as if it was going to try to keep me safe. That it wouldn't be safe to speak out, and the worst fear was that I would lose them. And on the contrary, what's happened is, I mean, it's just been extraordinary. Each one, I mean, there's 7 different siblings. It's been a different story with each one. Some of them will never read the book, and I never need them to read the book. I mean, they lived it, and I've told them that you never need to read this. Others, I are some of the ones I thought would never read it, have read it, and it's have let me know that it has been an extraordinary healing tool for the work that they're finally doing, and that has led the way, that they weren't crazy, that they didn't dream these things when we were the best family in the world, on the outside. And when my original title for the book that I worked with for years when I was writing it was Picture Perfect, because my mother was a photographer, and to the outside world we looked perfect. And that was the title, but then I found out it was a Jennifer Aniston rom-com.
I
And
was
so
just thinking about that. Yeah, I'm like, I think that's a Jennifer Aniston
yeah, that's a Jennifer
movie.
Aniston rom-com. So,
Oh, but the title that you picked is perfect.
oh, good. I'm
But
great.
since we're on the topic, because we
Yes.
talked about this too, let's talk a little bit about the cover and the art on the cover and what's
Yes.
come up about that.
Okay. So the cover is a picture that my mother took. So one of my mother's ways that she presented into the world, she was a beautiful photographer, and she always talked about the human body, and how beautiful the human body is, how natural the human body was. And you have to get that this is the late 50s and the 60s, when we're also in the hippie movement, and she was very much a hippie movement, hippie, trying everything. They tried, drugs, they everything. And so she used to have me model for her, pose for her, and dance for her in her studio. And of course, now I can talk about how sexualized and creepy and disgusting every part of it was, but it was presented as, you have such a beautiful body, you dance so beautifully, you're so feminine. Ugh, it's icky stuff just for me to say right now.
Yeah. It's like,
And
what do you call that when when a guy's preparing to molest a kid?
being
Grooming.
groomed.
She grooms you.
She was totally groomed me. She totally did. And that was also the only time I had one-to-one time with her, with all the kids and all the children. There were 4 younger and 3 older. But in the studio, it was only her with these bright lights shining on me behind her Rolleiflex camera, telling me, now turn this way, now pose like this, now put your hair over your shoulder and, turn your head and look out and peer at me. And it was this one time in all of my childhood with her where she showered this love and light, because of the studio lights were so bright on me. And then, told me what a beautiful dancer I mean, it's so creepy to talk about it now.
Yeah.
But I was totally being groomed. So anyway, one of those pictures, I have dozens and dozens of them, and they're yucky, of naked pictures that are over the line to pornography. But her ones that she took of other people too, she would say these are just beautiful art. So that line between art and pornography is very slight there. And so when we saw this one picture of me as a little girl posing for her, where you can't see anything of my body, it's all in the dark, but I'm looking out and my eyes look so sad. I'm about 10 years old. My husband and I said, this picture encapsulates the whole story, because it might look like beautiful art, and the beautiful human body, but you can see in the eyes of this child that she's very, very sad. We felt like this picture tells the whole story in one picture.
Mm.
So we put it on the cover of the book. And I think it's a beautiful cover, a really beautiful cover. But then now 3 times people have told me that they don't want to see a naked little girl. My brother is one of those people, and he didn't even want to read the book. And I made him a new cover. I just, put a beautiful picture of somebody meditating under a tree instead for him. And his thoughts were that he felt, number one, like he was in the room where it happened. And he lived with the same mother, so I could totally understand that. That made sense. But he also felt like it was perpetuating the abuse to have any little girl on the cover naked. And he is pleading with me to make a new cover, to use a different drawing or artwork or picture or photograph. So, and then there was a Hasidic community in New York, a therapist who also contacted me, and she wants to use the book with her patients. She said that this kind of abuse by a mother is actually very common in the Hasidic Jewish community, and she has patients that have experienced this. And
Wow.
it's very hidden. And she wants other therapists to use the book, and she wants her patients, her clients, to use the book, but they can't have any naked nudity, so they can't do it with this particular cover. She was asking me if I'd make a separate cover just for certain communities. And then the third one was, there was just an interview with me in Science of Mind magazine, which is an international spiritual magazine. And they told me, I didn't know they were going to do this, but when they published it, they said, we couldn't print the cover of your book. We put a different picture in instead, because we have a prison ministry. And we felt that it was too much nudity of a child for the prison ministry. So that's 3 times now. And so that's what I brought up with you at lunch the other day was,
I know. And I'm like just having this conversation with you again and going through our list of all the things we were going to talk about, and talking about your personal empowerment that you have now from finding your voice, which I can literally feel. And I'm so happy for you that you were able to find the courage and the strength to speak up and to enjoy like some liberated years of being open, honest, and authentic, and not living somebody else's lie that was imposed on you.
Yes.
So I'm wondering, when you come at it from that energy, because it's your book and it is your story. You do have brothers and sisters and they all have their own story, but this is your story. And with what we talked about, you want to reach as many people as you can. Where I'm kind of wondering where you're at now with how, but I want you to really think about it from yourself, not if you could do whatever you wanted and wasn't going to hurt anybody else, what do you think you would do with the cover?
I think I would take this picture off the cover, because I love this picture and what it does tell about the whole story that happened to me. But I do want my book to reach as many people as it can. If it can be of help to anyone who's still in their own dark room, and feels alone. And I mean, Maureen, I'm sure you understand, I can't even say the number of years and times I felt so hopeless that I would ever have a voice, or ever be believed, or ever be heard, or ever be free from this, the darkness of the secrets. If anyone is having that, and if they can't pick up the book because that cover in some way, and the other way is when my brother said it, he feels like it's still, in a sense, exposing her in the world. That really touched me, because I'm having to learn all about protecting that part of me, that little girl part of me, and now myself too.
Oh, that's interesting. When you just said that, I got goosebumps because that is sort of like you're putting out there her image of you, but you know what was going on inside you, and Hap knows you so well that you two probably have a different way of looking at. So it just goes to show it's a picture there, but it's all the filter of who's looking at it, how it's
Yes.
being perceived. Because when I read it didn't really impact me. It looked kind of haunting and I got the idea, but it didn't impact me the way it would, of course, if it was a sibling of yours or a community that's dealing with sexual abuse. And since that is the community that you're really looking to help those people, then and that doesn't feel disempowering to you, right?
No, you mean to change the cover?
Yeah,
No, yeah, no, it doesn't. I kind of feel like this book is on its own path now.
I know, right?
It really is. It's like I had this image of us, like of me surfing a wave, and then the book is on the wave with me, and we're kind of touching fingertips, but it's on its own path, and it has its own work to do in the world. I hope for it, and that I'm, of course, connected to it because it's my story and I wrote it. But no, it doesn't feel disempowering, because if it can reach more people, if I don't want it to be blocked in any way from reaching people. So I don't know. I still have no idea what the cover would be.
Oh, that one picture that we looked at of you looking innocent and your
Yeah.
eyes big, I think that was a beautiful picture of you.
Okay. Now that's an interesting, because my mother still took that picture. All the black and white pictures of my childhood are taken by her. So I
But
have
you're
to,
not all or nothing with your mother. So this
no.
is like you're putting something on the cover that's you, that she took, but it's appropriate.
Okay. Okay.
Right. But
Yeah.
you have to be, but anyway, okay, so that's your decision for sure. But the other thing that we just talked about today, and we talked about it before we came on the call, and it hit me, but it just really hit me now, is that your mother took all these images of you and she tried to keep this secret for so long. And we just talked about how you're a filmmaker.
Yes.
And for you to do a documentary film on your book would be to take all those images that she took of you that she
Yeah.
was trying to hide, and it would just like obliterate her secrets. Like
Wow.
the energy of them would just be like
Wow.
gone.
Yeah. Well, and if it was a documentary film, it would be the whole story, because there were so many layers of it.
Yeah.
At one point, a publisher was very interested several years ago in the book, and they wanted me to take out everything else in the book except for the abuse, the molesting of my mother. They said just a story of a mother molesting her daughter, because that hasn't been sold, and we haven't had those in popular literature. I was just no way, because to me,
Oh,
is that
yeah.
creepy? That's creepy. That's using her again, or the abuse. I wanted all the layers, and the layers are, there's so many, there's so much laughter in our family. There was camping trips, there was, there was the joking, there were so many wonderful, beautiful things that happened, amazing things, and love. And that is a part of, and the civil rights movement, which you can't, and the anti-Vietnam War movement. When I went at 15 and it was granted, I didn't have a parent protecting me through any of these
Oh,
things.
God. Not
They
at
were
all. You had no protection.
no protection, no protection. I mean, we ate trauma for breakfast. One of my sisters once said, I mean, it was around every corner. What next scary thing? Like you said, it was way more than just sexual abuse. It was, they were, as some people have said who read it, they would have been jailed, for the lack of
Oh,
care.
for sure. There's no
Yeah.
doubt. Yeah, for
Yeah.
sure. They would not have been able to keep all you kids if people knew what was going on in your
Exactly
in
right.
your home.
Right. Right. And so I needed to have all those parts and layers, because that's the story. And like you were saying, the denial of all of us living with it all those years is all woven into that, of not just were we prominent family on the outside, but we had love and good things happening too. I'm glad that they didn't separate us all, which they probably would have done had they known. And we would have been in foster care. So that's one of my nieces. I have several nieces and nephews who have been such a support. So that's the next generation of our sons, my two sons, and several nieces and nephews, children of my brothers and sisters, have been such champions of me to go forward and tell the story. So I have so much gratitude and excitement about the next generation, because they're not stopping. I mean, I can't tell you how our sons have just said to me, thank you for your courage, so that we didn't have to pass this on to our children. They have young babies now. And thank you for the work you've done and speaking. And um, one of them is having a hard time reading it, because he loves being a father so much that he can't stand the idea of even reading that this could have happened to all of us. So anyway, I'm excited for these nieces and nephews and our sons that are saying, speak out, you can do this now.
Yeah, it's
So
amazing, Claudia. The book is so well written.
thank you.
I can't even, I'm not going to go into all the different sections, but there I cried in that book. I was disgusted in that book. I laughed in that book. But really, I just have it, even just for the way you write, just your writing style is easy to read. It was an incredible story, and the amount of courage that it took for you to speak up, and the fact that you have your voice now, and that it took as long as it did, but you did it, is like there's no words for that.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for getting that so much, Maureen. That's
Oh my gosh,
fun.
it's huge. I can't even imagine.
Yeah, it's really, and it's only the beginning, because, I think I published it, and then it's been a year. This first year was just, how did this land with the people I love, people who I care so much about. And now I'm ready to give it to people like you, who don't know me, who didn't know me and haven't known me. And, because so many just people, friends for years said, for a long time, I thought I needed a ghostwriter, because I thought that I couldn't tell it myself. I couldn't write it myself. And my best friend, Monica, was always saying to me, you're a writer, you can write it, you can write it. And I didn't think I could. For one thing, I didn't think I could sit in a room by myself and write it. And then lo and behold, a woman named Elizabeth comes in my life and says, I'm going to sit with you. And she sat at the computer, and I told the stories, and she got the first draft down for me. And again, that kind of support, that it was too scary to do it by myself. And
Yeah,
even,
and the
yeah,
universe gave that to you, right? Every
yes,
step of the way, every time that you needed something next, it
yes,
gave it to you. And the universe is there to do that for all of us, but we have to be willing to look toward it. And sometimes it takes us longer than others. Sometimes we're brainwashed by our parents or by society or conditioning or whatever it might be, but it's always available. And you're a testament to that, because you're doing it, and you're 70 now, and you're liberated. You're no longer living a lie. You're
That's
telling
right.
the truth. Is there anything else that you haven't said here today that you would like to say before we finish the podcast?
Oh, I just guess one more time, if there's anybody in their own dark room that can't imagine that they can get out, because I mean, I was suicidal for several years. I had depression, all those parts of it. And I just, I can't think of all the times I almost gave up, and then something kept me going. And there's so much love on this other side of it in my life. I mean, our children, our grandchildren, our friends, the joyful playing pickleball, like you said, with Mark and Vicky, and everybody. It's just so that's the last thing I think I would say is that please don't give up if you're in that place, because there's a way, and like you said, there are people, there's resources. It sometimes never doesn't feel like it, or that sometimes it never feels like it's not going to end, the darkness and the hopelessness, but it does, it can, and it did for me.
Yeah. And that love for your siblings, that was a huge, that really drove everything from how you handled it at the beginning, trying to take responsibility, trying to protect them, how long it took for you to share the story. Now you're also wanting to help them since the book's out. So that love for them, and not everybody has 8 siblings. I have 9.
Yeah,
So
yeah, you have a big family.
we both happen to come from big families, but there's always people out there. There's always someone to turn to. And also, like, you could do all kinds of stuff with your book, with your film. You could do speaking events, you could talk about this stuff. Like, the sky's the limit. And isn't that exciting at your age?
Yes, it's very exciting. It's very exciting. I'm really looking forward. And I'm somebody who wants to work in team, as with teams of people. Again,
Yeah.
like you said, I didn't want to write it all by myself. It took this friend Elizabeth saying, "I'm going to sit by your side." I would love to do film, documentary, even a drama film, anything, that if I can work with other people in the creative process. That's what I love the most. So yeah, I can't wait to see where this goes.
Well, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. And I think everybody understands why you're inspiring after listening to this episode.
Thank you so much for having me on the podcast.
All right,
And
audience. Oh,
okay.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
And I said, for supporting me to do this. I really appreciate it.
Oh, I'm totally supporting you, and I'm going to be around for a while supporting you.
Okay, that sounds good.
All right. Okay, audience, I know you learned something valuable here today. I'll see you next episode. Thanks for being here and learning about Brain BS. I hope you enjoyed listening to the episode as much as I enjoyed creating it for you. If you did, please take a little time to do a quick review, give me 5 stars, and share it with everyone you know. If you're actually interested in being on the podcast yourself or have questions about it, you can find me in the Brain BS podcast community on Facebook. See you next time.